Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Casual Sports Podcast. I'm Alec Caverna. That is Mike Wolfgang. No, Matt. I missed a Mike.
You didn't miss much.
Yeah, I tuned in. I was driving. I just had the podcast pulled up for a little bit. Started off, and Matt was off to a rocky start. I'm like, ooh, he hasn't been on in a while. He doesn't remember how to start off the show.
Well, when's the last time all three of us were on here
It's
together?
been a while. Matt's been working hard over the summer. Hasn't had time to pop onto the show.
Hey, I have been too, but I make time.
Yeah, you've been on top of it, Mike.
I make time.
You've been, I think at this point you're like beating both Matt and I combined now.
Yeah.
You're rolling it. I was a travel day yesterday, making my way back from Akron. Stayed a day later than I thought I would. So
It's all
I'm
good.
back now. That's all that matters. And we had a completion of a sweep last night, Mike. The Avalanche, they got on top of, or they're nearing a sweep. They now lead it 3-0 over the Oilers. Well, no, pardon me, they did win it. I'm losing my mind.
Well, you're right, because I thought, Edmonton was up, and I thought they were going to win, so I thought it was going to be 3-1. But we'll talk about
But no,
that part
completion of
too.
the sweep last night, overtime 6-5, and a deflection wins it to send Colorado to the Stanley Cup Finals. They're now just one of a handful of teams to have only 2 losses going into the Stanley Cup Finals. It has been an elite postseason for them. Mike, depending on who comes out of the eastern side of it, whether it's the Rangers or Tampa, it's looking like New York right now. Both teams have really shown this season, or all 3 of these teams have really shown in this postseason that you can never count any of them out. So, one, we're going to get an exciting finish over in the Eastern Conference. And whatever this Stanley Cup is this year, I'm very excited to see whether Colorado can stay this electric or if one of these teams out of the East can make some noise.
Well, first of all, yeah, they're just too good right now, and they have been consistently all year. And I mean, Edmonton, you didn't want to end up with a sweep. They had the lead. They could close it out. They wanted to at least get one for pride reasons, but they couldn't. But you can give them, they made a deep run. It's the first time we really saw Connor McDavid in that group make a big run. So I think we're going to see a lot more of him over the years to come. So that part of it's nice. But with Colorado, they just
in the Western Conference Finals run at that, that's no thing to just push away, especially here in the NHL. It feels, I don't know, NHL feels harder sometimes to get into a conference finals than it does in basketball, even though they're both 7-game sets.
that's why they say the Stanley Cup's the hardest one to win in sports. It is. And
NBA, your opponent can just have a bad day. There's something about hockey that I think just because so many people come in and play in these games, and it's not just you have one star player. Most teams have a couple of guys, and all the lineup rotations and everything, I think really creates a very fluid game where the best team 9 times out of 10 does come away with a win.
Yeah, and again with McDavid and the crew they have, you're going to see a lot of him. I know we keep talking about how great he is because he is one of the greatest in the league right now. We're going to see a lot more of him to come. But with Colorado, it's their time right now. We've been talking all year. They keep building and building and building to this. They haven't gotten to this point the last couple of years. They look hard to beat right now. And I keep saying this I said this going into the Tampa series. I know we're going to talk about the other side of it too with New York because that's who they're going to be playing next. I said it with Tampa going in that I thought they're going to beat New York. I thought New York was going to run out of gas. If New York gets in this finals, I'm still going to pick Colorado, but you can't put it against them. But they're just a different level right now.
My thing with New York is now if they go in here and beat Tampa, even if this thing does get pushed to 7 games, which I kind of just hope it does, just because that seems to be New York's game plan really right now. And Tampa is good enough to force 7 games in this, even though they trail it 2-1 right now. New York has been gritty, man, this entire postseason. Every time you count them out, they're right back in it, and they take it from you. And something about this team, they're dangerous. And if I'm Colorado, I think I'd much rather face back-to-back Stanley Cup champions than the New York Rangers coming in after just dominant battle over in the Eastern Conference. In every step, they were just either getting dominated or dominating them, the other team. It was a very odd time to see New York really make this step up, but they're making a phenomenal run. Just remember, New York Rangers, choke city, baby. They're the Dallas Cowboys of the NHL. It may be worse at that point. They have, second most playoff wins in the last 16 years and no Stanley Cup championships to show for it. If that ain't choke city, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and really all of these teams besides Tampa have been, we can say how to get up with because we've been saying with Colorado, they've been great teams in the last couple of years, but they have nothing to show for it. Yeah. And they really found a way to click. And I think they were just night and day the better team this series. I thought, Edmonton could maybe win a game or two, but they were just. And we always talk about the facets you got to be good at. They have a great goalie. They play with a lot of speed. They're young. Nathan McKinnon's one of the best skilled guys in the league and scoring guys in the league, and that's what matters. But I think the one thing you got to, no matter who they play coming out of the East, going into the Stanley Cup Finals, they got to start playing better defense. Because as much as they can score, you're giving up a lot of goals. And the great Wayne Gretzky said on the postgame show last night, they can score with anybody, but if you want to win a Stanley Cup, you got to play somewhat an ounce of defense. So that's the big thing coming in. If that's the one thing you got to say they got to play better at, that's it right there.
Mike, that's the one thing that concerns me. However, they've lost 2 games with this same defense and allowing all these other goals. So it worries me a little bit. But to get to the Stanley Cup Finals, the amount of holes in your game plan is probably about that much. And that's what you're picking at right now, is about this much of a problem, because they still made it to the Stanley Cup Finals. They swept the Western Conference Finals. When you talk about having a complete team that can go out there and win games, Colorado could usher in a new era of NHL hockey where, you can kind of push defense out, because at the moment, we're looking at the best teams right now, and 3 of the teams that were in the conference finals were these hard, gritty teams with great defenses and just hammers of guys that are just looking to rock you off your feet. And then you have Colorado's speedy guys, skill guys, and lots of offense there. Colorado, if they can take a Stanley Cup championship with this team, I think it sets the precedent that Golden State did when they won their first title over Cleveland, a team that was beat pretty traditionally over in the NBA. And then you had this hot shooting, kind of not necessarily a great defensive team in Golden State. They had good defense. It wasn't great, though, like you saw pretty much out of the other teams in the conference finals that year. And even right now, Golden State's still working with that, going up against a great defense. They can still find ways to win. Colorado can kind of usher in a new era of hockey where you're going to start looking for more guys that can do it offensively rather than defensively. And I think we've kind of been seeing that change a little bit in hockey, especially from the 90s until now. I think a lot of people would say they've really moved away from the physical side of the game. You're looking for speed. You're looking for scoring ability out of every single guy coming out on the floor. That's what makes Colorado so dangerous. They had 6 goals last night, and it came from 6 different people. And that's the biggest thing I think you're looking at. They put 42 shots on goal last night, and they dominated a goalie in the Western Conference Finals, held him down to just an 85.7% save percentage in that game. Colorado, to me, this is the start of something new in the NHL, something that I think has kind of been slowly coming along. Especially, I think this year we've seen a lot of these high-scoring games, and I think this is really that year where it's starting to kind of come to the forefront. Colorado is that leading edge right now, and they're showing it out by moving into the Stanley Cup Finals off of a sweep without any defense.
Yeah, and I think if we're sitting here, they did play 2 of the games. They played pretty good on defense. They shut out the Oilers in Game 2.
Yeah,
and for the most part they played good, but
as well. So.
This is a team this is a match we were talking about coming in. As much as I'm saying, I'm not saying Colorado's defense is terrible, but it needs to improve.
Right.
And like you're saying, I think they could actually, they need to tighten it up, but they can get away with winning a Stanley Cup with having a decent defense, average defense. But this is against a team that with Oilers, we had question marks after the first round series, but they showed us something against the Flames in the second round. And this is an offense that we were talking about coming into the series with the Avalanche, that this is going to be a high scoring series because they both put up a lot of goals and can play a little bit on defense. But we talk about Connor McDavid and Evander Kane on this Oilers team, they're going to score their goals. But if Colorado, you always have to have a good, not great, but an average defense to win a Stanley Cup. And I think they have that. I think they can overcome that, get away with winning a cup with that, decent defense. But I think it's good for hockey, like you're saying, because everybody just says that it's too boring, like they say with baseball. If there's games like this where it's 6-5 games, a game like Game 1 where it's 8-6, I mean, some people might not like that, but that's going to bring somewhat more of a larger fan base in.
Yeah, it definitely will. And I mean, that's kind of the change-up we saw in the NBA as well. And even the NFL, scoring became more prevalent, viewership went up, and the league started pushing that offensive side. And I think it's going to hurt a lot of the traditional fans from watching the sport. But at the same time, I mean, there's a lot of sports that are looking to branch out. And Even baseball, the last 10 years, they've been trying to figure out ways to make offense more prevalent, to speed up games, to make more home runs. They want more offense in sports these days. It is just the era that we are in. We are in the era of scoring. Defense dominated the 90s and 2000s in pretty much every sport, but we're here in a new era, and people want exciting play all the time. And I do think I agree with what you're saying, that this is a good chance for the NHL to kind of push something like this and open up the NHL to new viewers, because I think they're a sport that a lot of people will like, but they just don't know about it yet and don't know how to get into it, don't know where to go. Having a Stanley Cup Finals with awesome offense in it is step one. And that's going to bring in a lot of bandwagoners, but they're going to jump on to Colorado in this postseason, I feel like, going into the Stanley Cup, no matter who. And you're going to bring in a ton of fans with New York and Tampa on the other side, whoever comes out of the Eastern Conference. And you're going to create a really big event this year with the Stanley Cup Finals, because we have multiple storylines to address going into it.
This is why the whole last week, or ever since the conference final started, we've been saying it'd be great if we had a Colorado and Tampa Bay final, because you're talking about an offense that's as dynamic as Colorado's, going up against two-time defending champs. If you want to bring more people into hockey, I mean, I know some people don't know that they're defending champs, but that's a great way to get people involved, because that's just a great matchup overall with great players. There's
and it's numerous great players for a three-peat.
Yeah,
three-peats bring in boatloads because people want to see if you can do it.
Yeah, so that's the big thing. It's who's going to knock them off, first of all. Like I said, you have this dynamic team going up against them. Great names on both sides. I mean, what else can you really want if you're trying to bring people in?
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a big part of what ends up happening here at the NHL. Well, let's flip this over to the other side. Rangers-Tampa, Game 4 here tonight in Tampa. Mike, what are your initial thoughts coming into it? Tampa took their game at home, and New York won both of theirs at home.
Well, I think the big thing before Game 3, I don't think I said this on the show Friday, but I thought of it afterwards. The big thing with Tampa in those first two games is they were trying to play more with, just because they're stars, like with Vasilevsky and Stamkos and all these guys that they have, which is, that's gotten them two Stanley Cups. But what also got them those two Stanley Cups is playing hard. And they didn't play as hard in those first two games. They kind of got outworked by New York. And I think they played better. They played more of that style in Game 3. And that got them to a win. The late second goal won them the game. So I wonder if that's going to bring some momentum on their side, because if you give it to defending champ momentum, that's all they really need.
Yeah, I mean, if you allow a team like Tampa to get hot at some point here, they're gonna go. And if I'm New York, I don't want Tampa to catch that lightning and ride that bolt into the Stanley Cup Finals. But at the same time, New York's got home ice advantage. They don't have to steal it on the road. So even if they lose here, if I'm a New York fan or if I'm on that Rangers squad, one of the coaches, I'm not worried about it, because we've seen a lot of home teams winning at home in this postseason. Carolina, the Hurricanes, were a perfect example. A one seed came in, didn't lose at home, and then they end up losing it, or two seed, I think they were. And then they end up getting knocked out despite not losing at their home arena. So we've seen that a lot in this postseason. Teams have been winning at home. 2-0 series get tied up after they go on to that second home trip. And right now, with these two fan bases, big ones, when you got defending champs on one side and a team from the New York on the other, you're going to have electric arenas every night. And the pressure is on Tampa, in my opinion, in the series. New York, actually, for the first time, I think looks like the favorite in the series, because they don't have to win on the road. And having Tampa coming in here, they know how to win in these scenarios, but it doesn't make it any easier.
Yeah, and I think a big thing with Tampa is that, these whole playoffs, the Rangers haven't played well on the road. We've seen this. They just stole a game in Pittsburgh. I think they won Game 7 in Carolina on the road, which was good. But it's hard to play in Tampa. It really is, because that's just where they're comfortable at. And like you said, I think for them to win the series, I have more confidence in them winning a game on the road than I do with the Rangers. And if they win a game on the road, they win the series,
right?
Like you just said. So, and they're definitely capable of doing that. So, when you're going up against a team that won 2 Stanley Cups against the Rangers that is young and they haven't been here as much, I know they've gone deep series the last 2 series, but I have more confidence in them winning a road game than the Rangers, and I think that's pretty clear so far in the playoffs.
Yeah, but we've seen New York. They've taken a road game in each series, and that's all they need. I mean, New York doesn't need even a road win to win this series, but, I mean, it wouldn't hurt. So going into Game 4 tonight, Tampa took the last game. It was a close one, 3-2. I think there's a good chance. I mean, the Rangers weren't that bad in that prior game. They just had the wrong bump. It didn't go their way. And they got to lock down a little bit more on defense. Both of these guys, we talked about the goalie matchup, Shesterkin, Vasilevsky. They're both electric guys, and that's why this series has been probably a little bit more low scoring than what we've seen over in the western side of things here in the Stanley Cup playoffs. It only takes one shot. Hockey is such a confusing sport sometimes because grabbing momentum most times out there on the floor seems impossible. And if you can grab it for a split second, you can find a way to win a game. Even if you only have momentum in a game for 30 seconds, if you can put that puck behind the pipe, then you're going to find a way to win a game. Tampa, they don't have to worry about that at home. They're going to do fine tonight. New York coming in, I think there's a good chance they steal this one, Mike.
Good chance, and I think that if they had a one, I don't know, we haven't started this game 4 yet, but if there was one for them to steal, it was this past game because they had a 2-0 lead, and they gave that up and they lost 3-2. So I think that's why I'm saying is if you want to say the momentum factor, that might get Tampa going a little bit here because they were sluggish in those first 2 games on the road, and they started out the home game sluggish, and that's not what you want to do when you're coming back home trailing the series. So, but they were fortunate to come away with it. But I don't want to keep sounding like a broken record, but I'm gonna keep picking Tampa until they lose because I'm more confident in their big three. I know I was saying in the first game they're trying to play with their skill more, or just because they're stars. That's not what they are. They play hard, and that's what got them these 2 runs they've had the last 2 years. But I'm going to keep picking them on. They're hard to beat at home. It's hard for me to pick somebody to beat Colorado or Tampa Bay at home because they're just hard to play at home.
Yeah, I mean that's a big fact. And going into tonight's game, I think I pushed this series to 7 when I made my pick, and I think I took it to Tampa. I'm going to stick it with that. I think I'm sticking with Tampa here. I like teams winning at home. That's what we've seen a lot this postseason. I don't think I'm ready to push away from that because, especially here in the East, that has been a huge conversation piece right now. So I'm going Tampa at home tonight, and we'll see what New York can do.
We'll see. I mean, I'm not putting out that they could steal this game because every time I count them out, they find a reason to shut me up. But I think I picked Tampa in 6, and I wouldn't really put it out if they were to win 3 more in a row.
I think that's a tough.
It's tough
right now, especially with the way New York's been playing here, and there's a good chance this goes 7 based on the fact that has just been the recipe so far for New York, and we know they can go the distance.
Yeah, and it goes Game 7. They got it at home.
I mean, if they go 7 games in every series, they're adding on 28 games. That's almost half the season that they've added on here in the last month.
Yeah, and we keep saying maybe they'll tire out, but they haven't yet.
And that's the big thing. I mean, you talked about it just a moment ago. New York's a very young team, and it doesn't seem to be wearing on their legs. And I think not only is that great for this season, that's great for next year, too, for this team. They put together a really solid roster.
And the thing, they're not really a star-studded team. That's what you got to like about them. Because, Chris Kreider's been there a while, but they're playing with a bunch of young guys that you're starting to find out about. But going into the series, we just thought, the Rangers are a good team, but we didn't really know too much about the players. Or at least maybe the average hockey person did. We all know they had a great goalie. We all know they had Chris Kreider. But, I mean, Sabanajed stepped up. They've had Lafreniere step up. They've had a lot of guys step up. And I guess that's what you got to like about them so far is they're just enjoying it. They're not getting tired by this. They want to keep going.
Yeah, they are. And it'll be an exciting thing to see as we continue to move along here in the Eastern Conference Finals for the Stanley Cup. But we're both taking Tampa tonight. That's correct? That's what you're going with? All right. Let's move it into the NBA here. Obviously, I didn't get to speak my piece about Sunday's game between the Celtics and Warriors. And they don't play tonight. They play tomorrow. So they got a 2-day break. Mike, going into Game 3, what are your initial thoughts coming out of Game 2? I don't know what you guys talked about yesterday.
I'll be quick because I want to hear what your thoughts are. But my thoughts were that, Golden State had the big third quarter. That's what they're known as. And I was telling Matt, they had a great third quarter in Game 1. They just had a terrible fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that fourth quarter in Game 1, they've pretty much been the best team to me because they had their great third quarter in both games. I know Steph had that great first quarter in Game 1, and they were only up by 4 points. But if you can just get Klay Thompson going here, that's a big thing for Golden State because especially in Game 2, he had 15 points in Game 1. I was sitting here saying, maybe get that up to 20. He's capable of doing that because we all know it's Klay Thompson. But he had a worse game in Game in game 2. And I think I like what Steve Kerr was doing at the end. He was trying to leave them in when it was, they were cleaning the benches out to try to get something going. And I think he's going to wake up at some point. But to me, if you're a Golden State fan, you got to be sitting pretty happy because he's not playing well. And the only quarter they lost was that fourth quarter got blitzed by Boston. So that was my big takeaway. And I mean, pretty much from game 2 was just that big third quarter from them that won it for him. Because before that, the whole first quarter was a slugfest. They only were up like 2 points at halftime. So that's my big thing is I'm just being a Golden State and riding that third quarter wave.
Yeah, they have been riding that third quarter wave, and I do think if Klay Thompson gets going, they can put this series to rest. The only thing, Boston did what they needed to in the first 2 games. They executed. They did things perfectly. The people are going to look at game 2, Golden State ran away. Even game 1, Golden State dominated the majority of the game, but Boston still won. But the biggest thing, Golden State lost one at home. Boston stole one on the road, and we know in the NBA Finals, that's the hardest thing to do. We talked about it just a moment ago in hockey, how hard it's been to win on the road here. I'm not worried about Golden State going on the road.
No.
But I know Boston's better at home. And I think that's going to be a big piece of this postseason in this Finals matchup in these next 2 games. Boston has been a really good home team, especially in the last, 6 months of the year. They have been a great home team. Even when they were slumping at the beginning of the year, their home and away splits weren't that bad. They were still looking like a pretty good team. So I feel more confident about Boston going back home. I don't think they're going to have another 88-point game. Part of that was they lost all momentum. They hit that third quarter like a brick wall. And Golden State, they had their normal third quarter. Boston still won the fourth. Again, they won the fourth quarter, and I love to see that. But keep in mind, Warriors took all their guys out. And Celtics, they took a lot of their guys out. They left some of them in. But the one thing I hate most to come out of this is Draymond Green was right. And one, I hate saying that because I don't really love – I have a love-hate relationship towards Draymond Green. I love that he's that big mouth talker defensive player because I think the NBA misses that. At the same time, you hate it because he's that big mouth trash talker and everything, and he's dirty as hell. Yeah. But he was right. Horford had 2 points and 8 rebounds. Robert Williams, 2 points and 2 rebounds. Marcus Smart, 2 points, 5 assists. He was right. You're not going to get that same performance that you had in game 1 with these guys. But at the same time, now they're going to go back home, 2 days rest, 1 day rest, 1 day to look at film and get things going and figure out what the changeup needs to be in game 3. The other piece is, I don't know if you're going to get Steph Curry like this every game because we saw him slump in game 1 and he came out on fire in game 2 and did things just fine. But I think there were other pieces involved with this, and a big one was, and I hate to be that guy because I don't have any chips on this table. I'm a viewer here, an analyst, but I think a huge part of what Golden State got right in this game was the calls. You watch that game and you kind of look critically at some of the bigger moments, and Golden State got away with a lot. And there were a lot of calls that I was sitting there on the couch watching. I just went, what? How is this going this way? The play with Gary Payton Jr. going up. I think Jaylen Brown was on defense. Payton kind of sidesteps him and tries to lay it up. He misses. They call a shooting foul. You look at the replay, and there's no contact. Gary Payton just missed a layup, and they give him 2 free throws at the line. That was a big momentum piece because he had just checked in, coming off of some injuries. Crowd was getting amped up. They were going wild. So people will just go, oh, well, that's 2 points from a bench player. Yes, it was 2 points from a bench player, but at the same time, that bench player is a crowd favorite. He got a call, he got points. That brings the crowd into it even more, and you don't need to amp up this Golden State crowd. They know how to bring the thunder, and having that in there, it felt to me a big turning piece in this ball game because there were a couple other calls at that point that just everything was going Golden State's way when it came to the calls. And I know that's human error. You see it in baseball. You see it in a lot of sports. There's a lot of human error involved in refereeing. But at this high level of a game, this much speed, the calls in this game were just flat out terrible. And there were a lot of moments like that. I mean, Draymond Green tried to pants Jaylen Brown for, Pete's sake. And in a normal game, normal season, Draymond gets hit with his second technical and he's out of the game. Jaylen Brown would have got his first. Refs didn't want to call it. They said this on the broadcast. The refs didn't want to call it because they didn't want to have to remove somebody from the game. Draymond Green this postseason, I think in that game, picked up his 5th or 6th technical foul. I think he's 1 or 2 away from being ejected, just like he was back in 2016. He's a dirty player. I can't, say anything about the way he plays that I like it because he's putting players in danger. And there were a couple other moments in this game. I think Derek White made a good defensive play, blocked it off the backboard, looked like LeBron James. And in the process, Jordan Poole hits the ground. Derek White tries to jump over him. I don't know if it was a reactionary move, but Jordan Poole puts his hand up and basically trips Derek White as he's going over top of him. In a regular season game, that's a technical foul. That's something. They stopped play, didn't assess a foul. That's not something that should be happening in the NBA Finals. If players are on the ground on one side of the floor and you stop play, you better have a reason for stopping play, not just so that Golden State can put one of their best players back down on the other end of the floor on defense. That was a big problem for me. Refs in Game 2 were clearly on the side of Golden State, and that's a big problem that the NBA, not the teams, need to address going into Game 3. In this big of a series, you can't have refs making massive mistakes like they were in this game. That doesn't discredit the fact that, these two teams were neck and neck going into halftime. It was a 2-point lead for Golden State, and Boston very easily could have, stayed in this game if they had a better third quarter. They had just 14 points, and that is a big reason. That is the contributing factor to why they lost. But I think some of that goes back to the momentum. They kept losing on plays and those calls by the referees. So going into Game 3, no matter how these refs are calling it, Boston can't lose their rhythm, because even the first 2 quarters, in which I thought a lot of those calls were going against Boston, they were still only down by 2 points at the half. So the calls, I think, affected their ability to ever build the lead and allow Golden State to take it. They're going into halftime. But I don't think it impacts their ability to win a game. I always say it, don't let the refs decide your fate. If you are having problems with the refs, then stop going in there looking for calls. You got to know that the game is going against you. Momentum is swinging towards the other side of the field for you tonight. Go out there and just play your game. And you know what? Calls will be what they are, and you got to live with those results. The only thing you can control out there on the floor is what you do. And I thought that's where the Celtics really struggled last night. They got in their own heads because they kept going out there looking for the calls that weren't going their way.
Yeah, that was the thing, because as much as we're saying Draymond, some iffy things with him call-wise, he came out and he really did set the tone early defensively. And I know he was talking about, Horford and them guys after Game 1 saying, they're not going to shoot the way they did. He made sure that didn't happen. He made sure that they didn't come out with momentum. He made sure that even though they had leads in the first half, that he made sure that if you guys are going to win, you're not going to win easy. And that's what I do like about Draymond Green. I'm with you. There's some things I don't like about him. There's things that I do like about him. That's one of them, is that he came out and as much as we keep saying he's got to watch it for his team, that, he doesn't get ejected, because now things shift to Game 3, Alec. They're playing in Boston, and the fans are going to be all over him.
Yeah, they will.
So they're going to try to force him.
Game, and he's got to keep himself under control.
They're going to try to force him to get technical fouls. I don't know how much Boston. If I were them, I would go out and just try to play my game. But we'll see if they try to entice him with that crowd on their side, try to get him all amped up, because it doesn't take much for him. But that was a big part of it too. I'm not really one to look into officiating too much. I'm with you on that, but there are some questionable ones, as there was. But when it just comes down to that third quarter for me, because when I keep talking about it, I've said this how many times when they played the Cavs. I've been saying it all year. When they go on a third quarter run, they're hitting 35, 40-foot bombs. I don't care who you have on your team. You just can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and my big thing, I don't always like to go in there and talk about the referees.
I don't either.
What happened in it, but I think to an extent you do have to at least look at it and say, okay, yeah, it might have had an effect on something here. And I think the biggest thing, it's not always the calls that are giving the team something.
Sometimes
or another.
No calls.
It's momentum. Yeah, I think the biggest thing with referees and how they impact the game is momentum. And I think when you talk about momentum in a basketball game, it is the most important thing when you talk about that kind of stuff. And when a team is consistently losing momentum every single time that, call isn't going away, I think it contributed to what that third quarter was. They went into halftime feeling like the world was against them, and they kind of came out playing like it. They had no energy left in them. They felt, disoriented. Nothing was going their way. It didn't matter if they were going to make their shots because they weren't going to get the calls anywhere else. Going into game 3 back at home, I think that you got to hope that a couple more calls go their way because it normally does go to the home team. I think that's an undeniable thing we always see when we go into the NBA Finals is home team tends to get a little bit more calls their way. Part of that's the crowd. Part of that, I think, just referees being there. They hear that crowd reaction and, the bench is a little bit more involved into it when you're at home. I think they're a little bit more trigger happy for those home teams because they know that crowd is around them. So going back into game 3, I think I hope Boston can even this thing out a little bit more when it comes to that side of it. But even if things are going against them, they got to stay locked in. You got to block out the noise. People are going to talk. People are going to hate for them. People are going to say, "Oh, it's over. Golden State, cleared house right now. Clear this thing up. It's done. Golden State tied the series. It's over for Boston." We saw a great shooting night. Everything has gone right for Golden State in game 2. Boston, they need to block out the noise. That's something that city is actually pretty great at doing, is blocking out a lot of noise, especially players in that cities. We've seen it in the last, 70 years. Players that have to play in Boston, they got to have thick skin. They're going up in one of the nastiest fan bases in all of sports. You start having a bad day, a bad game, and they want your blood. I mean, that's a fact. Whether, we're talking about back in the 50s or even now. I mean, you see it when a team, Boston Red Sox, had a terrible start to the season, and people wanted the heads of some of those players just a month into the year. Things have changed around for them, and the fan base is going to go how the team goes. And it's up to the players to keep that noise just blocked out, focus in on what you're doing. Coming back home, get that good home cooking, sleep in your beds. Jason Tatum, just keep being Jason Tatum. I know his shooting numbers aren't fantastic right now, but I think he still has the mental edge. Coming into game 3, Jason Tatum still believes in himself, and I think that's the most important piece. He believes in himself to knock this down. Boston, they've matched Golden State and actually outshot them in this series right now from behind the three-point arc. That is a huge upside for Boston. It didn't translate in that last game. They both hit 15 of 37 from downtown, and free throw shooting, Boston was better in percentage-wise, but they had one less make because Golden State had 3 more attempts, hit 1 more in total. But some of those interior shots, Boston needs to get better at driving into the lane. A lot of times they drive into the mid-range and they start forcing shots. In watching that third quarter, a big reason why they weren't staying with Golden State is they forced way too many shots. Marcus Smart was having a bad day, and just like Jason Tatum was in game 1, he should have became a passer first instead of score first, because Marcus Smart is not the scorer. He has good days and he has games where he is on, but that's not who he is. That's not who he's really ever been. He's a defensive lockdown guy, and they put him in at the point guard position. Dish out the ball. Get these to your best players. Find somebody that's on deep in this lineup. And I think there were some times last night or on Sunday night where the Boston players, they were forcing just way too much. And if you start forcing things against Golden State, you're going to lose. Because Golden State in this game had 15 steals. Boston had just 5. And that is huge. Because Boston had 5 more blocks than Golden State, but it didn't matter. Assists were even. Rebounds were even again. But points in the paint, Boston had 24. Golden State had 40. And that is the difference maker in this game. Because fouls were even, free throws were pretty much, I mean, they both hit the same amount, so you can't really even say that changed it. 3-pointers were the same, but points in the paint. Golden State knows how to put them down. Boston started, feeling the pressure, and they choked. They choked hard in that game. They forced way too much.
Well,
especially in that third.
Some things, just from what you were talking about, number one, with being able to stay locked in when you're going into environments like this. That, to me, that and going into game 3, that's advantage Boston or Golden State, because we've seen how many different cities they've been in on the playoffs, how many different crowds they've faced. You can even argue as well as they play at home, they play just as good on the road, because they go into on the road, they deal with that atmosphere that they're in that's against them, and they just shut you up. They've done it countless times over the years. And to what you were saying about Jason Tatum as well, is he started out really well in that first half of game 2. He was shooting the ball with a lot more confidence. He was going in the net. He was seeing it going. He was feeling better. And he went away from that in the third quarter. Not like he wasn't trying, but it's just not that he wasn't making shots because he was still attempting them, but it just wasn't as much. It didn't seem like he was hitting his spots enough as he was in the first half, that he was getting to his spots and putting the ball in the basket. And I know they really didn't play well at all as a team in that second half, but that's what I want to see more of him, especially coming home, because he's going to be more comfortable hitting his spots at home, seeing go in the net. I want to see him play good consistently for the whole game because we haven't seen that yet. Game 1, he was pretty much terrible. And Game 1, it was just a tale of two halves for him. So I want to see him do it consistently if they're going to have a chance to win Game 3 or the series in general.
And, one thing about, seeing more Tatum, I definitely want more Tatum. 3 assists for him. I need that number to go up.
You have to see more of him.
You got to see more Jason Tatum scoring the ball and more assisting the ball, too. Don't give this to Marcus Smart. Don't have him be the guy bring it down the floor. If he's going cold, Tatum needs to take over. Just like, you've seen in a lot of big series. Kawhi took the ball over from Lowry in the Toronto series against Golden State when Lowry got a little bit sluggish. I mean, you even saw it in the last series. Jimmy Butler took the ball from Lowry against this Boston team to try and find some momentum. We know Boston can shut down your number one. Steph Curry is probably the hardest number one to shut down in the entirety of the NBA because of his scoring abilities, and they're unmatched. But coming in to Game 3, I need more Tatum. And Jaylen Brown, he needs to make this his town, baby, because when Jaylen Brown is on, I think he's a better player than Jason Tatum. When Jaylen Brown is at his best, he's a better player than Tatum. Tatum is just a much more consistent guy and is clearly a number one scorer because of his offensive and defensive consistency. But Jaylen Brown is the key to Boston's success because you see it here tonight. On Sunday, Tatum had a good day. Jaylen Brown was okay. They lose big time. Game 1, Jason Tatum was meh. Jaylen Brown was off, and he was awesome, and they win Game 1. I said it after Game 1. Jaylen Brown opens up the rest of this offense. When Brown is on, the floor opens up. Everybody plays better. It doesn't happen when Tatum is better. Tatum doesn't make his teammates better. Jaylen Brown makes his teammates better. That's not a dig at Tatum. That's more of a compliment to what Jaylen Brown has done for this team and the way he's kind of embraced, whether he's never been touted as the guy. And I think because of that, he has kind of developed a better leadership with the rest of this team because he's played that bench guy. He's been that guy that hardly gets any minutes. And he's played the big superstar. He's posterized the king. He's had big games. He has played every role for this team where Tatum has always been looked at as that star, as the next face of Boston. So I think it opens the floor because I think the team is more receptive to Jaylen Brown when he's having a good day. They feel his energy. He has a big smile on his face and he's ready to go. He's a ball of energy for Boston, and he needs to go off in Game 3 if they want to win at home, especially with that crowd.
And like you were saying though, with guys that take the ball away from guys that are trying to do, like Kawhi Leonard taking away from Lowry, Jimmy Butler taking it away from Lowry. I mean, the difference between those two is that Kawhi Leonard won a championship with that, but you got to win and lose your best player. And I know Miami just lost with Jimmy Butler doing that, but you win and lose with your best player. You took that last shot, you win and lose that way. And I think that I want to see that from Boston. Is I want to see Jason Tatum take control of the game, or at least not take the game over, but at least be that guy. Hey, I want the ball in these big moments.
And I think he will be.
He will be, and I think he can. He's well capable of doing that. I just want to see more of that, especially at this time of his career. Being in the finals, this is your first time here. I want to see, because we would think that maybe he'd be back. We don't know what the future holds. But while you're here, take control of it. And I think the big thing I talked about, Matt, yesterday, that I want to see, as much as I just said I want to see Jason Tatum put a complete game together, I want to see Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have two great games together in back-to-back games.
Yeah,
we've been seeing it in one game, especially Miami series, the Milwaukee series, every series. They have great games, but they don't do it consistently, back-to-back. I want to see that happen more often.
And I think a big thing to keep in mind, we're talking about Jason Tatum taking over a game and making this his game. Keep in mind, he's still only 23 years old.
Yeah.
He's not an old guy, and we're asking him to go up against a 33-year-old veteran on the other side of Steph Curry, who's been dealing it for the last 7 years. He was dealing it while Jason Tatum was still eating lunch in his high school cafeteria, which I think is a huge thing to remember coming into this. The experience is paramount. in this NBA Finals.
For both teams, I mean, from all positions.
Yeah.
Really,
I mean, Al Horford is like Al Horford and Marcus Smart, or Al Horford and Marcus Smart, kind of like the two old guys for the Celtics. And Al Horford Marcus Smart is still only like 30.
Yeah.
You know, he's still younger, despite the fact he probably looks older than just about everybody playing outside of Draymond Green. By the way, did you see Draymond's beard? He's got a lot of scraggly grays going on.
You see his hair too? Old. Yeah, his head.
He's finally looking old in that. But as much as we're talking about all the things Celtics need to do better, I think this was a day for Golden State where they had some things click their way. I mean, I don't think you're going to get 17 points out of Jordan Poole every game. I don't think you're going to get 11 or 12 points out of Looney. I don't think you're going to get a near triple-double day out of Draymond Green. I know he wasn't that close to 9, 7, and 5. Definitely not his best day. But I think a lot of things went right in this game, especially with calls. They had a lot of help off the bench, and that doesn't happen often for this team. They are set in their ways. 7, 8 guys is what they're going to roll. And in this game, they had help scoring from 9 guys deep into their rotation. So Gary Payton got some, Poole got some, Porter got some, Bjelica got some, and Moody even had some coming off the bench before they finally went in there in those last couple of minutes and just kind of, I won't say threw the game away, but they kind of just stopped the tapes, had everybody pack up and go, all right, game's over, we win it here. But I don't think you're going to see those performances off the bench every single time out, especially now that you're going on the road, because a lot of the depth for Golden State, as much as we talk about the veteran leadership, they got a lot of young depth. I mean, Gary Payton's been in the league for a little bit now. He hasn't been there forever. I mean, he's definitely one of the more experienced guys coming off the bench. I mean, he's 29 years old now, and he was drafted back in 2016, though. So he's been here for a little bit, not a terribly long time. And when I look at this depth right now for Golden State, I just think you have to be careful. Don't jump into it. Oh, man, look, Steph Curry went off. They're going to have this every game. I don't think you are because, one, I still think this was a bad shooting night in general for both teams. I think they both kind of stunk up the joint when it came to shooting it. But at the same time, I think we saw some players step up that you're not going to see step up every game. As much as Draymond Green said it wasn't going to be Horford and Smart doing it again, you're also not going to hold them to combined 4 points the rest of this series. So there's going to be a lot of fluidity going into Game 3, a lot of change-ups I think I want to see for both teams. I want the Warriors to win playing clean because there was a point last night, and, you know, Steph Curry's one of his big threes there that really kind of pushed that third quarter run and got all over, like, Sports Center and stuff this morning and yesterday. Draymond Green is there and set 3 illegal screens all at the same time to set up that three-pointer. I don't mind Golden State winning. I just don't want to see it happen this way. They're such a good team. They don't need help from the refs. They don't need help from getting no calls. I want to see this be a legit series because if these two teams are playing their best, this goes 7. And this is the series the NBA really needs to capitalize on. I mean, they're kind of pushing it. They brought logos back onto the floor, which I love, by the way. I love seeing those.
I wish they were actually on the floor, though.
Are they just the digital ones?
They're just the digital ones, yeah.
Well, you can't really tell when they do the wide angle, so I think it's fine because they've introduced this technology, and it's wonderful, by the way. You can't even tell unless they cut to a different shot, and the stuff's not there. But I love seeing the logos back everywhere in NBA Finals. It feels like, you know, you brought the 2 best teams. They're back into it now, or 2 oldest teams back into it. Everything is kind of set up for this to be a monumental series for the NBA. And after Game 2, in the way calls influenced momentum in this game, I think it hurts the NBA. Because I know they want to get up there with the numbers the NFL produces. Every sports league wants that. And they're not going to have that because they're not very physical. And having ticky-tack calls and on one side and then completely ignoring everything else on the other is not going to help out with that viewership.
Well, I think, too, is the calls, too, like you're saying. As much as we just talk about with hockey, if, you know, things change and it's a lot more high scoring, you're going to lose older generation of fans, which is going to happen over time. But I'm sitting here watching the game the other night, and when they were reviewing that thing with Jordan Poole and Derek White, you know, I thought it was kind of, you know, dangerous, too, as I saw it happen live. But they showed the replay. For the most part, it was like just reaction. Because if I was Jordan Poole too, I would try to put my hands up a little bit just in case he fell on me. It's just a reaction thing. Right. But they're sitting here reviewing it. It's like reviewing it for a hostile act. I mean, come on. When did you ever think you'd hear that term in basketball? I'm just sitting here like, come on. That's what we're reviewing here in the NBA Finals.
NBA Finals, yeah. Regular season, I think you probably look at it. But here in the NBA Finals, let the guys play.
But there's just so many different
physical play.
There's so many different types of fouls. Flagrant 1, flagrant 2, hostile act. I mean, can't there just be a foul or not foul? I mean, or flagrant, I get the flagrant.
Too, they took like 5 minutes to get there. And
for
they
nothing.
had like commercial breaks as well on either side of it, and then gave no call, and then it completely disrupted flow. Boston actually had some momentum at that point coming off a huge block like that, and the refs just halt the game. And I think that's a big part of what I'm talking about. It's not necessarily the calls, it's the timing of the calls, too, and how things work. Fluidity of the game should take some precedent at some point, and it shouldn't just be, making a call just to make a call.
Yeah.
If you see something and it's there, you got to call it one. But if there's nothing, if you don't see something egregious, then don't call it.
Yeah,
I agree. There's no need. And here's one of the other biggest things I've just recently developed a problem with. I haven't spoken about it yet, but when it comes to the amount of protection that three-point shooters get, they barely get breathed on, and it's a free throw.
Yeah.
Yet, we see centers going on the inside, basically getting punched in the rib cage and elbowed everywhere. Arms are getting just absolutely butchered up there. Not like they were in the 90s, but, they get absolutely, bumped around in the paint, and there's no calls in there. And I think when you look at a series like this, especially with the great three-point shooting that Golden State has, I think that edges to their advantage, despite the fact that Boston has been right there with it. But this is just more in general. How come it's a three-point shooter can barely get breathed on and they get free throws, yet a center can go inside and get absolutely drilled in the rib cage, and he misses the shot, and then the game just continues going on? I don't like the lack of consistency when it comes to shooting fouls.
I think that's what I was going to say. I think that's why people get frustrated. It's a lack of consistency and the lack of, you're going to go here and review this play, but in certain situations in the playoffs or certain times of the regular season, you don't review it. It's got to be all the time or nothing with some of the stuff. And like you're saying, with down low and up at the top of the key and the perimeter, it's got to be the same game everywhere. And for every team, too.
Yeah. Well, my biggest thing, too, it's every time somebody gets posterized by the act of what a shooting foul is, that's a shooting foul.
Mm-hmm.
Because, number one, if a player is going up to shoot the ball, whether they dunk the basketball, lay it up, or shoot an outside shot, that defender is now in his landing area.
Yeah.
That's a shooting foul. We made that a shooting foul a couple of years ago. In fact, sometimes it's even called a technical foul. And yet that's not called inside because, that would be bad for basketball. Yeah, what do you think it's doing at the three-point arc? It's just the NBA, I think, is losing their touch here when it comes. I think they took a couple steps too far with some of these rules right now.
I definitely agree. And I had that same thought when I was watching this game and some other games in the playoffs. I think they're just trying to do too much.
Yeah, but Boston, they got Jason Tatum locked up until the 2024-25 season. After that, he still has a player option, which is going to be $37 million guaranteed. So I got a good feeling he's going to take that unless his value absolutely skyrockets, which I don't know if it will, but he's on the second year of a 5-year deal. It's going to be big for him. This was his first big contract. He wants that second one, especially in Boston. He's got to find a way to win this series and at least not win it. He needs to at least force this to 7. That's what Boston needs, is a 7-game series. Bring some life back to the franchise. But we got to move on here. We'll give our predictions for Game 3 back in Boston tomorrow. We got more to talk about on that, of course. But let's head over into Major League Baseball and what's been going on there. Boston, they've won 5 in a row now, 7-3 in their last 10. They really have done a great job digging their way back into the conversation. Now just 11.5 games back. But at the top of the standings, New York, the Yankees, have now won 6 in a row. So as you're seeing Boston finally getting some momentum, the Yankees have gone on an absolute tear here for the AL East, despite the fact Toronto's also done a great job building a lead out. Tampa has stuck right in there, despite the fact that they're kind of falling apart at this point. And as much as, everyone wants to talk that the Dodgers probably are the best team in baseball just by the numbers alone, I got to say the Yankees, man, probably right now would be the team I'd least want to face.
And I don't really, when I'm talking about best team in baseball, I don't really go by stats or whatever. I go by my eye test. Because your eye test is going to tell you who's the best team. And right now it's the Yankees. 6 in a row. They've swept some good teams too. I know they're on a recent slide now with the Angels losing 11 in a row.
And I got to say, Mets are probably right behind them with the Dodgers sitting in third.
I think the two best teams in baseball are the two teams in New York.
Which I hate to say, by the way.
I didn't think I'd say that too, because we kept talking about the first few weeks of the season and the whole month of the season. Are the Mets going to continue it? I've seen nothing so far to say that they can't.
Yeah.
Nothing, because I talked about they bring in Max Scherzer, they beefed up their pitching staff. They really beefed up everywhere.
And how about this one last night? Eduardo Escobar hit the first cycle for the Mets in 10 years.
Yeah.
And the fact that something like that is happening, I think just kind of goes out there to show that this is a new Mets team. Having something like that, you kind of look at it and go, yeah, oh, well, whatever. It's just the cycle. It's one game. It doesn't really matter. But I think it's kind of the culmination of a lot of things that have been going on for the Mets over the last couple of years. They finally built this team to where it needs to be. And having a game like that, I think just goes to show that this Mets team is a really good team. And they're for real. Having a guy that can go out there and do that is one of the hardest things to do in baseball outside of a perfect game. I think it's huge.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It might not seem as big, but when you start getting stuff that doesn't happen in decades, that just makes things feel different. It makes you feel like, okay, we're having fun now. We're getting our good mindset back. We're getting all this stuff back. And if you're looking at the division here, the second best team's the Braves, and I really don't have much confidence in them to catch them. Because I haven't seen anything from the Braves this year that blows me away.
They found a little bit of momentum here and there, especially to move out of third and kind of push their way up the standings a little bit in the second. But it's only a matter of time before the Phillies kind of just continue to punch it with them. I think both those teams have a good chance of falling off at some point.
Yeah.
I think I just like the Phillies better than Atlanta right now, despite the fact that Atlanta has a winning record and the Phillies don't. I don't know. There's something you look at it, that eye test, I think, is a real thing. I haven't seen a lot of the games, but, you look at things and you kind of feel a momentum when you look at those numbers sometimes. And I think the Phillies have more momentum going than Atlanta, despite the fact that Atlanta's 7-3 in their last 10 and they've won their last 5 in a row. I think it's nice to look at, but it's not always the most important thing. 7 games in the last 10 games, they paint a picture. They don't paint a story.
And we're sitting here talking about a Philly team that just fired the coach last week.
Yeah.
And sometimes in any sport, when you fire a coach mid-season, sometimes you find something. And I don't know if they're going to, but we'll see, because they
kind of hope they do, though. Because
I kind of do too.
I think we all need to see that NL East kind of ramp up something. Someone's got to challenge the Mets.
And especially the last couple of years, this has not been one of the better divisions. It's been one of the least entertaining ones, because last year you had the Braves, Mets fell off. I mean, we need some entertainment in this division. And I think that's why a lot of people are talking about the Yankees division, because it's consistently over the last couple of years been the best. It's so deep. Any team could really do anything in that division, and I think that we need that more competitive balance over the National League, because the National League's kind of weak to me.
Yeah, I don't love it this year. They've been really good, but there's no team right now that I'm just like, woo, that's the team to watch out for, because the Dodgers have had holes. They're 5-5 in their last 10. The entire NL West basically has a losing record, or they're 500 or under in the last 10 games. NL Central, they're starting to beef up a little bit. Mike, your Pirates, they're up to third now in the NL Central. They got a good chance of closing in on St. Louis if St. Louis ever starts slowing down, because they're also picking things up just like you guys are. NL East, though, it's just the Mets.
Yeah.
To say the NL Central might be the tightest race, the most interesting race out in the National League, I think is an embarrassment to baseball.
I mean, it's got to be the Central or the West. It's not the East. Yeah. I'd still probably sit here and say the West in the National League is more entertaining, because you have more good teams in it.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good year for the Padres, I think. It's because the last couple of years we're talking about them getting all these free agents. We're keeping an eye on them, saying they're going to do something. It seems like coming into this year they have had a little bit less attention on them, and I think that's good for them. It
was a little bit of a choir start. I think mainly because they had such a big fall off last year.
Yeah.
They were that third team, and San Fran went on their big run, and the Padres completely fell off when San Francisco made all that noise. But one thing I want to bring in here, a lot of people love to look at numbers in baseball, and I think this is an important one. Batting averages and ERA in the last 3 seasons for baseball. Right now, We've seen consistent drops in batting average, and ERAs have actually gone down as well. It's really been a pitcher's year this year, and I want to give the examples here. Batting average in 2020 for the league was 245. In 21, it was 244. This year, it's down to 240. So you saw a one thousandth of a drop between 2020 and 2021. Now you're seeing an extra 0.004 come off that. That's not a lot to look at, but when you're looking at this big of a database, that little bit of change is real. And I think the bigger one, last 4 years in pitching for baseball. In 2019, the ERA league average was 4.46. In 2020, that dropped to 4.25. In 2021, that dropped to 4.15. This year, it's taken its biggest jump in the last 5 years. Currently, it stands down at just 3.39. That's nearly a full 1 run less than what we've seen in just last season. And currently, the best team is the Yankees with a team ERA of 2.74, and the worst is the Reds with a team ERA of 5.36. And those numbers are both miles ahead of what they were last year. Worst team last year was only a 5.24. The difference between first and second was this much, with the best team being the Dodgers at 3.01. Now this year you have the Yankees at 2.74 and the Reds at 5.36. You're seeing pitchers really start separating that gap, and we're seeing some really great pitching now. And I think we're in a big spot for the baseball on what we have. And a big piece of that is you look at some of these prospects coming up, especially the Dodgers rotation that's already so great right now, and they've led Major League Baseball in the last 2 seasons. Right now in their top 30 prospects, 11 of them are right-handed pitchers, just right-handed. I don't know how many lefties they got, but I saw 11 right-handed pitchers in their top 30.
Yeah, you're seeing a lot more talent come out young-wise in the minor leagues that are going to be top of the line, top of rotation pitchers, and I love it. I love pitching. It's something
the
really
best
good
prospects as well. I mean, I know I kind of threw one out there the other day with Akron. They had a big night with that walk-off home run. Walk-off grand slam, I think it was. No, it was just a home run. But
that shot over the scoreboard.
Yes, that one I talked about. I gave it highlight of the week last week or something.
Yeah.
There was that, and then I don't know. We've seen a lot of prospects make that jump right up here into Major League Baseball and have made some instantaneous noise. I mean, Stephen Kwan to start the year. Obviously, your Pirates are starting to bring guys up. They're making plenty of noise. Dodgers got lots of guys down there in their farm system. We got one of the best farm system classes, I think, coming up, and we got a real changing of the guard coming here to baseball.
Yeah, and teams are beefing up their farm systems. You're starting to see how important it is.
I think a big part of that is it's not something people liked, but when we made that change of they got rid of so many minor league teams, all the single A's, I think it did open up the door for a little bit more money to go to those other AAA and AA teams. And I think as much as no one liked it, I think it was really good for baseball. Yeah, seeing this now in the long term, it seems to be helping out.
Yeah, and I keep saying when as much as we don't like it for these small market teams that we're fans of, when you trade people away, that's the idea, is to beef up your minor league system. Because you got to have guys that can fill up when you lose somebody. You
got to have the best guys available, and that's what you need. Unfortunately, though, we can't go any more into this. We are out of time here on the Casual Sports Podcast this week. Tune in to the Power Hour coming up next on your sports network. I've been Alec Brenna. That's Mike Wolfgang. We'll see you all tomorrow. Adios.